Before I dive into the details of this story, some of which are almost comically absurd, others excruciatingly painful, I think it's crucial to set the scene. The me of today, a 6-year-old woman, is sitting here, typing these words with a sense of calm I once thought I'd never regain. My hands move across the keyboard, a warm cup of tea beside me, and through the window, I can see the man I call the love of my life, tending to the plants on our balcony. He is there, a solid, real presence, with no secrets to hide. It is this very peace that gives me the strength to look back at an old chapter of my life, a chapter that for a long time was a festering wound on my soul, a bitter reminder of my own naivety, or to be blunt, my stupidity. This story took place about 8 years ago, when I was 28. At 28, you tend to think you're grown up enough, wise enough to see the world for what it is. I certainly did. I had a career I loved in wedding and event planning, a close circle of friends, and a relatively stable life. Even though at that specific time, I was between apartments and had moved back in temporarily with my mom. I wasn't a starry-eyed romantic, not the type to believe in love at first sight or fairy tale endings. I was practical, independent, and I prided myself on my ability to read people. But perhaps it was that very overconfidence that became my Achilles heel. For years after everything imploded, I was haunted. Every night, as silence fell, the questions would spiral in my head like a broken record on an endless loop. What did I do wrong? Why didn't I see it sooner? How could someone as smart as me be so spectacularly fooled? Those questions gnawed away at my self-esteem, reducing it to a pile of ashes. I began to doubt everything, from my own judgment to my self-worth. I felt small, pathetic. Every time I started a new relationship, the ghost of Jamie would reappear, making me suspicious, anxious, and constantly searching for signs of deceit, even when there were none. It was a psychological prison of my own making, and it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and the help of those who loved me to finally break free. Now, at 36, I no longer look back on this story with shame or anger. Instead, I see a vulnerable 8-year-old girl, someone who craved love and was too quick to place her trust in someone unworthy. I see an expensive lesson, a trial by fire that taught me about red flags, those glaring warning signs that I had either deliberately or unknowingly ignored. I learned that sometimes we want to believe in something beautiful so badly that we are willing to blind ourselves to the truth. I'm not writing this story to condemn Jamie. Time has faded the hatred. I'm writing it for myself, to affirm that I have truly moved on. And perhaps I'm writing it for anyone who might be in a similar situation, wondering why they feel insecure, why things in their relationship don't quite add up. I want to tell them, trust your gut. Red flags don't just appear out of nowhere. They are warning signals the universe sends to protect you. And recognizing them isn't a sign of paranoia, it's a sign of self-respect. My story is proof that even after the most devastating storm, the sun will rise again, and you can find a safe harbor, a place with no glaring red flags, only a sincere and transparent love. This is the journey from blindness to enlightenment, and I am ready to tell it in detail. The world of online dating, back then, was both a promised land and a minefield. With my hectic work schedule, especially during wedding season, dating apps seemed like the only viable way to meet someone. I had tried a few, swiping through countless similar-looking profiles, cliché bios, and bland conversations that led nowhere. I was on the verge of giving up, accepting that maybe it just wasn't the right time for me to find a relationship. And then, Jamie showed up. His profile popped up with the magic words local to me. This immediately caught my attention. The logistics of dating someone far away had always been a barrier, and the thought of someone right around the corner, someone I could easily meet after a long day at work, was incredibly appealing. His profile picture wasn't one of those overly polished, professionally taken shots. It was a natural, candid photo. He was smiling, a wide, slightly mischievous grin. He was wearing a simple t-shirt. His hair was a little messy, and his eyes seemed to sparkle with joy. He looked approachable, friendly, and completely non-threatening. His bio was short and genuine. He wrote about his love for football, the weekends spent with his team, his passion for spontaneous road trips, and his job at the service station just down the road from my house. It was this last detail that sealed the deal. That service station was right next to the park and ride I used every single day to get to work. It was a coincidence. So convenient it felt like fate. I could already picture us grabbing coffee together in the mornings before I caught the bus into the city, or me stopping by to say hello on my way home. The thought was sweet and practical. We started talking around July. Our conversations flowed with a natural, astonishing ease. There were no awkward silences, no dry interview-style questions. Jamie had a fantastic sense of humour. He was witty, clever, and always knew how to make me laugh. We texted daily, from simple good morning messages to deep conversations that lasted late into the night. He asked about my job, seeming genuinely interested in my stories about couples and the behind-the-scenes drama of weddings. He told me about his football team, his close friends, and his dream of one day opening his own auto repair shop. He painted a picture of a hard-working, passionate, and emotionally available man with ambition. He was also a master at creating an emotional connection. He remembered the small details I told him, like my mum's cat's name or my favourite kind of cake. He would send me encouraging texts on days I was facing a big, stressful event. He made me feel seen, heard, and cared for. Over the course of 2 months of talking only through a screen, I had built an almost perfect image of Jamie in my mind. He was everything I was looking for: funny, smart, thoughtful, and most importantly, close by. The geographical convenience, combined with the strong emotional connection he forged, acted as a potent anesthetic, lulling me into a state of complete trust. I no longer saw him as a stranger from the internet, but as a kindred spirit I just hadn't met in person yet. So, when he suggested our first date at the end of September, I agreed without hesitation. I was ready, even eager, to turn this virtual connection into a reality, completely unaware that the reality I was about to face was a universe away from what I had imagined. After 2 months of non-stop conversation, the anticipation for our first date had reached a fever pitch. I had imagined various scenarios: a romantic dinner in a cozy restaurant, a walk in the park on a golden autumn afternoon, or even just a simple coffee date to finally see his smile in person. But Jamie's suggestion was completely outside of anything I could have imagined. "I have an idea," he texted. "It might be a little different, but I think you'll love it. My nan has a caravan at a park nearby. It's really quiet and beautiful. We could go there, have a bonfire, grill some food, and watch the stars. I'll set up a tent for us. It'll be really romantic." At first I hesitated. A caravan park? A tent? For a first date? It seemed a bit fast, a bit too intimate. A rational part of my brain sounded an alarm. Meeting a stranger from the internet and immediately going to a secluded place to stay overnight. It sounded like the opening scene of a horror movie. But then, the emotional part of me, the part that had been charmed by Jamie for 2 months, quickly overruled it. He just wants to create a special and memorable date, it reasoned. He doesn't want a cliché date like everyone else. This shows he's creative and romantic. Besides, I had been talking to him every day for 2 months. I felt like I knew him. He knew about my friends, my family, my job. He had never shown any sign of being suspicious. Trust had been built, albeit through texts and calls. I reassured myself that I wasn't being careless. I took precautions. I told my best friend, who lived not far from that caravan park, about my plan. I shared my live location with her on my phone. We had agreed on a code word, a harmless word I would text if I felt unsafe and needed her to come rescue me. With that safety net in place, I pushed aside my final reservations and agreed to Jamie's plan. The date itself, on the surface, was absolutely perfect. Jamie picked me up, and he was even more charming in person than in his photos. His smile, his voice, it was all familiar and warm. The caravan park was indeed beautiful. Nestled beside a small lake, the air fresh and still. His nan's caravan was old but clean. He had prepared everything. A fire pit was already lit, radiating warmth and the fragrant smell of burning pine. He had brought steaks, salad, and a bottle of red wine. We sat by the fire, eating dinner and talking. Under the flickering firelight, everything felt magical. After dinner, we went into the tent. It was a large tent, spacious enough for 2. Inside, he had laid out blankets and pillows. We lay side by side, looking up at the night sky through the tent's mesh window, the stars sparkling like diamonds on black velvet. He told me about the constellations, about his camping trips as a kid. He held my hand, and it felt so right, so natural. That night, we were together, and it was wonderful. Not for a single moment did I feel unsafe or regretful. I didn't need to use the code word. I was completely won over. Looking back now with the eyes of a 3-6-year-old who has seen enough of life, I see its glaring abnormality. A first date in a secluded spot, staying overnight, that was a massive red flag. It wasn't romance. It was a tactic. By creating a completely private, isolated space, he controlled the entire narrative. There were no friends, no family, no prying eyes of passers-by. Just him and me. He had manufactured a bubble of false intimacy, fast-tracking the relationship at an incredible pace. He skipped all the normal steps of getting to know someone and went straight to the most intimate stage. At the time, I thought it was a whirlwind of passion, but now I understand. It was a calculated move to bind me to the relationship quickly, before I had a chance to see the cracks in his story. That perfect date was in fact the first, masterfully laid brick in the wall of lies he was about to build around me. After that intensely romantic and somewhat whirlwind first date, we quickly became an official couple. It all felt as natural as breathing. The good morning babe text became an essential part of my daily routine. His sweet words and constant attention had me swimming in a sea of happiness. However, as the initial novelty wore off and the relationship settled into a more stable phase, a strange, unwritten rule began to form, a rule that, at the time, I accepted with astonishing ease. We never, ever went to Jamie's place. In the entire 9 months we were together, I never once set foot in the place Jamie called home. This wasn't a minor detail. It was a gaping hole, a massive missing piece in the puzzle of his life. A home isn't just a place to sleep. It's a reflection of a person's identity, their personality, their hobbies, and their life. It's where you find family photos, souvenirs, favorite books, or even just a very real mess. By refusing to show me where he lived, Jamie was hiding a critically important part of who he was. Initially, it didn't seem like a big deal. My own circumstances at the time inadvertently created the perfect cover for his deception. I was in the process of moving and had to temporarily return to my childhood bedroom at my mum's house. This made me feel a bit self-conscious. I was a 8-year-old independent woman, yet I was living with a parent. So, when Jamie never suggested going to his place, I didn't question it much. A part of me even felt relieved. We had a false sense of fairness. Neither of our homes was an ideal dating spot. Every time I casually mentioned stopping by his place, he always had a remarkably plausible reason to say no. "Oh, my kitchen is being renovated right now. It's a complete mess. You'd run for the hills if you saw it," he'd say with a charming smile. Another time, the excuse was, "My roommate is a bit weird. He doesn't like having guests over. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Another time, "My landlord is super strict. No guests allowed after 10 p.m. The reasons were constantly changing, but they were always convincing enough for me not to doubt them. I thought, he's so considerate, he doesn't want me to see a mess, or he's just trying to avoid an awkward situation with his roommate. I accepted these explanations without a hint of skepticism. Instead, our dating locations became fixed, either at my mum's house or out. We often met at my place. My mum liked him. She found him to be a polite and charming young man. He would often bring flowers or a bottle of wine, playing the part of the perfect boyfriend. But privacy at my mum's was, of course, limited. So, Jamie came up with a brilliant solution. "I know it's a bit inconvenient at your place sometimes," he said, his voice full of understanding. "How about we occasionally find a cute little B and B to get more privacy? Think of it as our little getaway." The idea sounded incredibly romantic. It didn't feel like sneaking into a cheap motel. It was a planned experience, a mini-adventure. He had successfully turned a suspicious behavior, avoiding his own home, into a romantic gesture. We stayed in several different B&Bs, places with cozy rooms and delicious breakfasts. I saw these as sweet memories, as his way of showing he cared and wanted quality private time with me. I didn't realize that these B&Bs were, in fact, neutral, sterile spaces where he could maintain his lies without fear of being discovered. There, he didn't have to explain a photograph, an object, or the absence of any personal belongings. Now looking back, I see the sheer absurdity of it. Dating a man for 9 months without knowing his address, without knowing who he lived with, without knowing what his room looked like. It was a red flag the size of a football stadium. A healthy relationship is built on openness and sharing. A person's home is a fundamental part of that sharing. His insistence on keeping it hidden wasn't about privacy or a difficult roommate. It was because another life, another truth, existed there, another woman named Sarah. He couldn't take me home, simply because it was also her home. And I, in my love-induced blindness, had accepted a relationship with no foundation, a relationship built entirely on temporary spaces and well-polished lies. One of the most sophisticated aspects of Jamie's charade was how he masterfully redefined the concept of spending time together. He was a virtuoso of perception management, turning fleeting, fragmented moments into evidence that our relationship was strong and deep, despite the time constraints. He constructed a perfect narrative about us both being busy, career-driven adults, and used that very narrative to justify his frequent absences. Jamie worked at the service station right next to the park and ride I used daily. This geographical convenience, initially a huge plus, was weaponized by him to maintain the relationship on a minimal effort basis. Most mornings, on my way to work, I would stop by the service station to see him. These meetings typically lasted only about 15 to 20 minutes. I would park my car, walk into the convenience store and coffee shop area, and he would take a short break from his shift to come out and meet me. In those brief 20 minutes, he would play the role of the perfect boyfriend. He'd ask about my previous day, my plans for the current one. He'd listen as I vented about a difficult client or a problem with an upcoming event. He would offer advice, say a few encouraging words, and end it with a tight hug and a quick kiss before I had to get on the bus into the city. Afterwards, he would text me, "Seeing you this morning is the fuel for my whole day. It's so great that we can make time for each other like this." Similarly, on evenings when I finished work, if our schedules aligned, I would stop by again. Another 20 minutes. He'd ask about my day, tell a funny story from his work, and we'd part ways. These fleeting encounters, in his view, were quality over quantity. He would frequently say things like, "I know we're both busy, but the fact that we always make an effort to see each other, even for just a few minutes, shows how serious we are about this." Or, "We're a modern couple, both driven in our careers. I'm proud of that. We don't need to be attached at the hip 24/7 like other couples." At the time, I completely bought into his rhetoric. I was busy too. My event planning job demanded long hours and irregular schedules, especially on weekends, so his logic sounded perfectly reasonable. I felt lucky to have a boyfriend who understood and supported my career, someone who wasn't demanding or controlling of my time. I was proud of our mature relationship. I would boast to my friends that we weren't a clingy couple, that we respected each other's space and careers. But now, looking back, I see the deception in it all. It wasn't a mature relationship. It was a relationship kept on life support. Those 20-minute meetups weren't quality time. They were check-ins, roll calls to make sure I was still there, still buying his story. They were the perfect way for him to maintain a presence in my life while still having ample time for his other life, his life with Sarah. A real relationship needs more than brief encounters at a service station. It needs lazy evenings on the couch, watching a movie together. It needs home-cooked meals, whether they're good or bad. It needs long, meandering conversations about nothing in particular. It needs real presence, not just hurried drive-bys. Jamie had stripped me of all those things and replaced them with an illusion of quality time. He had conditioned me to believe that receiving mere crumbs of his time and attention was enough. He had lowered my expectations to the bare minimum, so he could easily meet them while comfortably living his double life. It was an incredibly sophisticated form of psychological manipulation, and I had fallen for it perfectly, even taking pride in the very cage I was in. Among the scattered fragments of deception that Jamie constructed, his behavior at the Starbucks in the service station was perhaps one of the most specific and bizarre red flags. It wasn't a grand, all-encompassing lie like hiding his home or redefining our time together. Instead, it was a small, repetitive anomaly that, in retrospect, served as a tiny window into his entire fraudulent network. As I mentioned, our morning meetups often took place in the common area of the service station, which housed a convenience store and a Starbucks. My journey from the park and ride to the city centre took about 20 minutes, sometimes longer with traffic, so a coffee for the road was an almost daily ritual. Jamie, in his role as the attentive boyfriend, would often offer to buy me coffee. "Let me get this for you. A little energy for your day," he would typically say. "I'm not someone who expects to be paid for. I am perfectly happy and able to pay for my own coffee." But his gesture was sweet. It made me feel cared for. However, after a few weeks, I began to notice a very strange pattern. Jamie only performed this generous act when one specific colleague of his, a young woman named Claudia, was not there. Claudia also worked at the Starbucks. She was young, pretty, with bright blonde hair and a constant smile. Jamie had introduced her to me vaguely as a good friend from work. The first time I met her, she seemed friendly, but there was something distant, almost evaluative in her eyes. The unwritten rule went like this. If I arrived and Claudia was on shift, standing behind the counter, our conversation with Jamie would take place in another corner of the store. When I went to the counter to order my drink, Jamie would suddenly have an excuse to go back to work or take a phone call, leaving me to pay for myself. He would say things like, "Oh shoot, I have to go, my boss is calling," or "Go ahead and order, I'll just step outside for this call." Then he would vanish until I had already paid. Conversely, if I arrived and another employee was working, Jamie would happily walk to the counter with me, order my drink for me, and pay with his card. He would joke with the barista, ask how they were doing, and act completely natural and at ease. At first, I just thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he really was busier when Claudia was around. But as it happened again and again, a vague sense of unease began to creep in. I didn't care about paying for my own coffee again. The issue was never the money. The issue was the abrupt change in his behavior. Why did Claudia's presence affect how he treated me? Why did a simple gesture like buying a cup of coffee become so complicated? I once tried to ask him about it gently. "I've noticed you always seem to get busy whenever Claudia is here," I said, trying to keep my tone light and playful. Jamie just laughed it off. "It's just a coincidence, babe. Claudia is the shift manager, so when she's here, things are more intense. I have to be on my toes. It's nothing." That explanation, like all his others, sounded plausible on the surface. But my intuition, that deep part of our minds we so often ignore, was telling me something was wrong. His behavior wasn't professionalism, it was stealth. He didn't want Claudia to see him buying me coffee. He didn't want her to witness any act that suggested a special intimacy or care between us. Now, I understand exactly why. Jamie wasn't just cheating on me and Sarah. He was also angling with Claudia. He was building a flirtatious, ambiguous relationship with her. He had introduced me to Claudia as just a new friend he'd met through another friend, a purely platonic and unremarkable connection. Buying coffee for a friend is normal, but buying coffee every single day for the same woman would raise suspicion. It would elevate me from a friend to someone special. And that was something Jamie could not afford. He needed to keep his worlds completely separate. Every cup of coffee I paid for myself in Claudia's presence was a testament to his deceit. He had calculated every minor action to maintain his complex web of lies. He was afraid that a small gesture, like paying $4 for a latte, could bring the entire sandcastle he had so carefully built crashing down. This red flag wasn't just about coffee. It was about concealment, inconsistency, and the existence of a potential threat right in front of my eyes. A threat I had met, spoken to, but completely failed to recognize for her true role in Jamie's play. Football wasn't just a hobby for Jamie. It was a cornerstone of the identity he presented to me. From our very first conversations, he spoke about his team with a fiery passion. He was the captain, the star striker. He told me stories of glorious goals, nail-biting matches, and the tight-knit brotherhood of his teammates. Every Saturday was game day, his holy day. As a supportive girlfriend, I completely respected and encouraged his passion. More than that, I genuinely wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be integrated into that world. I wasn't a football expert, but I wanted to stand on the sidelines, cheering for him, seeing him in a different element where he shined and was himself. I pictured myself wearing his team's jersey, screaming his name when he scored, and then going out for celebratory beers with the whole team afterward. It was a beautiful image of integration, of fully sharing our lives with each other. However, every single time I suggested coming to watch him play, that door was slammed shut in my face. Jamie always had a reason, a perfectly crafted excuse to say no. My job in event planning meant that I often worked on Saturdays. So, the Saturdays I had off were rare and precious. When such a day came around, I would excitedly tell Jamie, "Babe, I have this Saturday off. Can I please come watch your game? I really want to see my captain in action." His reaction was always a mix of feigned regret and a clever refusal. "Oh, really? That's such a shame," he'd say, his voice full of disappointment. "This Saturday we have an away game. It's really far out. It would be a hassle for you to travel. Come to a home game next time, okay?" The next time I had a day off, the answer would be, "This is a really important match, babe. The pressure is insane. I need to be 100% focused. If you're there, I'll just get distracted looking at you, and then how am I supposed to play?" He'd say it with a flirty smile, turning his rejection into a compliment. I naively believed it was true, that my presence had such a powerful effect. Another time, the excuse was, "The guys on the team are a bit rough. They swear a lot. I don't want you to have to listen to that kind of language. You're my princess." And so it went, one excuse after another. Away games, pressure, rude teammates, bad weather, an unimportant friendly match. There was always an invisible wall preventing me from entering his football world. I felt a little sad and a bit hurt. I just wanted to show my support. Why was it so difficult? But then I would reassure myself. He's just looking out for me, I thought. He doesn't want me to travel far. He doesn't want me to feel uncomfortable. I accepted that this was his personal space, a place reserved for men only. The truth, of course, was far more brutal. Saturday wasn't just Jamie's game day. It was also his fixed date day with Sarah. Later, when Sarah and I were comparing our stories, this piece of the puzzle clicked into place with heartbreaking perfection. Sarah went to every single one of Jamie's home games. She knew all his teammates. She was an integral part of that football family. She was the one who washed his muddy kit, the one who massaged his tired legs after a match. She was the very image of the supportive, cheering girlfriend that I had yearned to be. The excuses Jamie gave me weren't to protect me. They were lies constructed to prevent a catastrophe. His two girlfriends showing up at the same place at the same time. He couldn't let me come to the football pitch because Sarah was already there. He had turned his passion into a fortress, a heavily guarded space where he could maintain his role with Sarah without fear of being discovered by me. This red flag wasn't just about being excluded. It was about deliberate segregation. Someone who truly loves you wants to share their passions with you. They would be proud to introduce you to the important people in their life, whether it's family, friends, or teammates. Jamie's insistence on keeping me out of his football world was a clear sign that I was not a real part of his life. I was just a secret, a satellite orbiting his life at a safe distance, never allowed to collide with the main planet, the one where Sarah lived. If being barred from his home and his football games were specific red flags, then being completely excluded from Jamie's entire social circle was a systemic, all-encompassing red flag. It was a fundamental deficit in our relationship. For the 9 months we were together, a period long enough for a normal couple to begin merging their lives, I remained a ghost in Jamie's world. I never met a single one of his close friends, beyond vague mentions. I was never invited to a birthday party, a weekend barbecue, or a casual get-together, and most significantly, I never met any member of his family. Family was a topic Jamie spoke about quite often. He told me about his mother, a wonderful woman he adored. He shared stories of his loving but fiery arguments with his sister. He painted a picture of a warm, close-knit family. He even had me help him pick out a birthday present for his mom. I spent an entire afternoon wandering through a department store, carefully selecting a silk scarf I thought she would love. I imagined the moment I would meet her, being introduced as her son's girlfriend. But that moment never came. "My mom says thank you so much," Jamie told me a few days later. "She absolutely loves the scarf, said you have great taste." He had passed on the gift, but he never passed on an invitation. When I asked if I could meet her, he would hedge. "My mum's been a bit tired lately. Let's wait until she's feeling better." Or, "My family is a bit old-fashioned. I want to wait a bit longer." until things are really solid, before I introduce you. I don't want to put any pressure on you." He had masterfully framed his secrecy as an act of protection, a consideration for my feelings. He made me feel that not meeting his family was because he respected me and our relationship too much, not because he was hiding something. The same pattern applied to his friends. He talked about them extensively. There was the football crew and his close friends from childhood. He told funny stories about their trips, their silly inside jokes. He made them feel real in my mind, so much so that I felt like I already knew them. But they remained just names, characters in his stories. "Your friends are having a barbecue this weekend. Can I come along?" I would suggest. "Oh, it's just a bunch of guys, babe." The conversation is so boring. You'd be bored to tears. "It's more fun for us to do our own thing," he would reply. He always managed to position his social events as unsuitable or dull for me, while our private dates were framed as special and high quality. This isolation was gradual and subtle. It wasn't a blunt declaration, "You are not allowed to meet my friends and family." Instead, it was a series of clever deflections, plausible excuses, and indefinite postponements. He built an invisible wall around me, separating me from his real life. Our relationship existed in a vacuum, a bubble where it was only ever him and me. Looking back, this is one of the most classic manipulation tactics. By isolating you from their support network and social context, a manipulator can maintain complete control of the narrative. There is no one else to verify their stories. No friends or family members who might accidentally let a contradictory detail slip. I only knew Jamie through the lens Jamie wanted me to see him through. He was the sole storyteller, and I was his captive audience. A healthy relationship is an intertwining of two worlds. Your friends become my friends, and vice versa. Your family knows of my existence. We build a shared life together, not just a collection of private moments. Jamie's complete refusal to allow this integration was the clearest sign that I held no real, long-term place in his plans. I was just a supporting character in a much larger play, a role kept secret from all the other actors. He didn't introduce me to anyone, because my existence in the role of girlfriend would have collapsed the entire script he was performing for his main audience, Sarah. In the digital age we live in, social media is more than just a platform for sharing photos of meals or vacations. It has become an extension of our social identity, a digital chronicle of our lives, relationships, and major milestones. Changing your Facebook relationship status from single to in a relationship with is a modern-day ritual, a public declaration, however cliché, of commitment. It sends a message not just to your circle of friends, but to the world, that you've found someone special and are no longer on the market. For me, at that point, after a few months of dating, going Facebook official seemed like a natural step, a small way to formalize the happiness I was feeling. But for Jamie, it was a red line he absolutely would not cross, and his reason, privacy, was the most sophisticatedly disguised red flag of all. I remember the day I finally worked up the courage to mention it. We had been dating for about 4 or 5 months. Everything, in my perception, was going wonderfully. We had our B&B getaways, we had shared secrets, or so I thought, and we had settled into a comfortable rhythm. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch at my mum's place, both scrolling through our phones in a comfortable silence, I came across a post from an old friend who had just updated her status to engaged. A warm feeling, mixed with a little envy, washed over me. I turned to Jamie, smiled, and said hesitantly, "Look, my friend just got engaged. That's so nice." I was thinking, you know, we've been together for a while now. Would you ever think about making us official? Just a little status change. I said it with a light-hearted nervousness. I wasn't asking for a proposal, just a small acknowledgement in the virtual world. I expected him to smile, agree, and we'd perform that small but meaningful act together. Instead, Jamie put his phone down, turned to me, his expression serious and slightly pitying, as if I had just suggested something incredibly naive and childish. "Babe," he began, his voice low and full of that understanding tone I would later recognize as his primary weapon. "I get why you'd think of that, but you have to know, I'm just not that kind of guy. I'm a very private person. What we have, it's too special, too real to be put on display for the whole world to see. It's our little world." He took my hand, looking deep into my eyes. I don't want likes and comments from people we haven't even spoken to in years getting in between us. Our relationship belongs to you and me, not to Facebook. You know what I mean? How could I not? His explanation wasn't just logical, it was deeply romantic. He had turned his refusal into a tribute to the uniqueness of our relationship. He elevated it to a higher plane, something too sacred to be sullied by the superficiality of social media. He made me feel shallow for even bringing it up. I felt a pang of shame. "Yeah, you're right," I mumbled. "I'm sorry, that's silly." And just like that, I accepted it. I swallowed his explanation whole. I even took pride in it. I told my best friend that Jamie was a very deep person, that he didn't care for superficial things like social media. "He says our relationship is our own private world," I had said with a foolish sense of pride. I had fallen into the trap of false exceptionalism, believing that our private relationship was superior to other, more public ones. But now, analysing it, I see the glaring, comical hypocrisy in his argument. Jamie was a private person? This was a man who regularly posted updates about his football matches, sharing celebratory photos with his teammates, in which I, of course, never appeared. He had a sizable friends list, and occasionally interacted on other people's walls. He was not a recluse, completely detached from the virtual world. He was only private about one single aspect of his life: me. The truth is, privacy is one of the most convenient and common cloaks for infidelity. It's not a life principle. It's a strategy. By refusing to make our relationship Facebook official, Jamie accomplished multiple goals at once. First, he kept his options open. A single status on social media is a subtle, open invitation. Second, and more importantly, it prevented the collision of his two worlds. Imagine if we had gone public. A mutual friend of his and Sarah's might have seen it. A teammate might have asked Sarah, "Who's this brunette Jamie is dating?" His entire house of cards would have collapsed with a single click. Social media, with its intricate web of connections, is the greatest enemy of secrecy. He didn't just refuse to change his status. He was pathologically careful to ensure no digital evidence of my existence was ever created. We never had a single photo together posted online. If I posted a photo and he happened to be in the background, he was never to be tagged. He rarely liked my posts and never commented anything that could be construed as intimate. I was a ghost in his online life, just as I was in his real one. This red flag ate at me quietly. Every time I saw friends post happy photos with their partners, a pang of insecurity would arise. Why couldn't we have that? Was this privacy really romantic, or was it a sign of shame? Was he ashamed of me? These questions flickered in my mind, but I quickly extinguished them, reminding myself of his deep explanation. I was in a state of cognitive dissonance, where my belief, he loves me, and this relationship is special, conflicted with reality, he is hiding my existence. And to resolve that discomfort, I chose to cling to the belief, distorting reality to fit the narrative I wanted to believe. I didn't realize that a man who truly loves and is proud of you would want to shout it from the rooftops, or at the very least, wouldn't mind clicking the "in a relationship with" button on Facebook. As our relationship approached the 9-month mark, my birthday in June drew near. Throughout that time, the red flags had continued to pop up, the inconsistencies persisted, but they were often obscured by Jamie's daily affirmations and sweet words. And then, for my birthday, he launched an all-out charm offensive, a masterclass in affection and generosity that I would only later recognize as a classic example of love bombing, a manipulative tactic designed to reinforce control and make the subsequent betrayal even more devastating. The celebration wasn't a single-day affair. Jamie turned it into a 3-day event, a birthday festival as he called it. It all began 2 days before my actual birthday. He showed up at my door after work, holding a massive bouquet of red roses and a radiant smile. "The birthday festival officially begins now," he declared. That night, he took me to a fancy Italian restaurant I had casually mentioned months ago. He had remembered. He had booked a private corner table, ordered my favorite wine, and throughout the meal, he hung on my every word, listening to my stories as if they were the most fascinating things in the world. The night before my birthday, he came over again, this time with a bottle of premium Prosecco and a carefully wrapped gift box. We sat in my mum's living room, sipping bubbly and talking. He raised his glass. "To the most incredible woman I've ever known. You are smart, beautiful, funny, and you make my life 1,000 times better. I'm so lucky to have you." His words were like honey, filling all the cracks of doubt in my heart. Then he handed me the gift box. I opened it, and inside was a navy blue Michael Kors handbag, the exact one I had gushed over when we had passed the store window a few weeks prior. It was expensive. It was a luxury item, far beyond what I had expected. I was floored. "Jamie, you didn't have to do this," I stammered. "It's beautiful, but it's too much." He just smiled and said, "Nothing is too much for you. You deserve the best of everything." On my actual birthday, he spent the entire evening with me. He didn't plan a big party, but an intimate evening, just for the two of us, as he put it. He brought a cake he had hand-picked. We blew out the candles together, and then we watched a romantic movie that I loved. He held me in his arms, whispering sweet nothings, and made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. For those 3 days, Jamie was the personification of the perfect boyfriend. He was thoughtful, generous, romantic, and completely focused on me. At that moment, I was drowning in happiness. I saw this performance as the ultimate proof of his love. All my previous little doubts, the not going to his place, the secret football games, the Facebook privacy, were obliterated by the glamour of the Michael Kors bag and the sweetness of the Prosecco. I thought, a man who didn't truly love me would never do all this. He really cares. Those other issues are just minor things. I was wrong. Now, with the clarity of hindsight, I see the true nature of that birthday festival. It was not an expression of love, it was a strategic investment. Manipulators understand that relationships operate on a kind of emotional bank account. By executing a spectacular love-bombing maneuver, Jamie made a massive deposit into that account. He created a thick cushion of beautiful memories and a sense of gratitude. This cushion served two purposes. First, it made me feel emotionally indebted to him, making it harder for me to complain or question his other suspicious behaviors. Who could doubt a boyfriend who had just gifted them a designer handbag? Second, it amplified the drama and pain of the impending betrayal. The higher you are, the harder you fall. He had lifted me to the pinnacle of happiness so that the subsequent push would send me crashing into a deeper abyss. His actions could also have been fueled by a creeping sense of guilt. Perhaps juggling two or more women simultaneously was causing some psychological strain. By being extra good to me, he could be assuaging his own conscience. "I'm a good boyfriend," he might have told himself. "Look at everything I do for her." It's a form of self-deception to justify one's own wrongdoing. The expensive gift, the flowery words, the undivided attention, they were all part of the act. They were props, carefully calculated lines to keep the audience, me, mesmerized and invested in the story. I didn't realize that while I was blissfully happy with my Michael Kors bag, another woman, Sarah, was likely receiving similar promises and sweet gestures. I thought I was the leading lady in a romance, but in reality, I was just a duped audience member in a sophisticated magic show, and that extravagant birthday gift was simply the most spectacular misdirection of all. Summer for someone in the wedding and events industry is like tax season for an accountant, a chaotic whirlwind of long days, sleepless nights, and a constant, thrumming adrenaline rush. That summer was no exception. Immediately after the wonderful birthday festival Jamie had orchestrated for me, I plunged headfirst into the vortex of work. One weekend it was a wedding at a historic manor, the next a corporate event downtown. My phone rang incessantly, my email inbox was overflowing, and my to-do list seemed infinite. In the midst of this busyness, I had very little time for social media. I'm a fairly lazy user even in my downtime, and when work was in high season, Facebook was all but forgotten. The Michael Kors bag was stored carefully in my closet. The other small gifts were placed on my dresser, and the memories of that glorious 3-day birthday celebration were still warm in my mind. But I hadn't had the time to sit down and write a proper thank you post. A few weeks went by. One afternoon, sitting on the bus on my way home after an exhausting client meeting, I found myself with a rare moment of free time. I scrolled through Facebook, catching up on my friends' updates. And then, a thought struck me. I still hadn't posted anything about my birthday. People had sent their well wishes, and I had received so much love and so many lovely gifts. I felt I should post something to show my gratitude. It wasn't an act of showing off, but a sincere gesture to thank the people who cared about me. And, of course, a huge part of that gratitude was directed at Jamie. Despite his privacy policy, I felt I couldn't write a birthday post without mentioning what he had done. He was the centerpiece of the celebration. I decided I would find a clever way to do it. I wouldn't tag him in a photo of us together, which I knew he disliked. Instead, I would post an artfully arranged photo of my gifts. When I got home, I set my plan into motion. I took the Michael Kors bag out of its box and placed it in the center of my bed. Around it, I arranged the other presents. A book from my best friend, a makeup set from my sister, a scarf from my mom. I took a few pictures, chose the best one with soft lighting and a pleasing composition. Then, I began to write the caption. I thought carefully about every word. I wanted it to be sincere, warm, and not too ostentatious. I wrote, "Finally getting a moment to breathe and reflect on my amazing birthday a few weeks ago. Feeling so incredibly lucky and loved. A huge thank you to my wonderful family and friends for all the wishes and lovely gifts." I tagged my mum, my siblings, and a few close friends. Then came the trickiest part, mentioning Jamie. I couldn't tag him, but I couldn't not mention him. After some consideration, I added a final sentence. And a very special thank you to my amazing boyfriend Jamie, who truly spoiled me and made me feel like a princess. This bag is just one of the wonderful things he did. I reread the entire post. It seemed perfect. It showed my gratitude to everyone. It acknowledged Jamie in a special way without breaking his rule about tagging. I had mentioned his name, but in what I thought was a subtle enough way. I felt pleased with myself for finding a solution that balanced my desires with his privacy. I hit post. Instantly, the likes and comments started rolling in. "Happy belated birthday. That bag is gorgeous. What a great boyfriend." I smiled, feeling a warmth from the positive reactions. I had no idea that with that innocent, well-intentioned act, I had just lit the fuse on a ticking time bomb. I hadn't posted a thank you note. I had posted a public testimony. I had provided irrefutable evidence, with a name and specific details, on a public platform. I had set up a stage, and the spotlight I had just turned on was shining directly on Jamie's deception, revealing the first major crack in the fortress he had so carefully constructed. The act of posting that photo, in retrospect, is a bitter irony. It stemmed from the most positive emotions: gratitude, love, and happiness. But those were the very emotions that had been manipulated and cultivated by Jamie to serve his own ends. And in the end, it was the expression of those emotions that became the catalyst for the downfall of it all. I thought I was sharing my joy with the world. In reality, I had just raised a white flag, an unintentional signal to another woman somewhere out there, a woman who was living in a different version of the same lie, and she had seen it. After hitting post, I felt a sense of relief and happiness. I had done something I felt I needed to do, a public acknowledgement of the people I loved. I replied to a few comments, smiled at the praise for Jamie, and then put my phone away to make dinner. I didn't give the post another thought. To me, it was just a fleeting moment on a digital timeline, a small marker of my personal happiness. I had absolutely no idea that, somewhere else, my post had triggered a seismic event. The evening passed as usual. I had dinner with my mum, watched a bit of television, and then went up to my room to prepare for the next workday. I didn't check Facebook again. I fell asleep feeling content, my mind still lingering on the sweetness of my birthday memories. The next morning, I woke up, rushed through my routine, and caught the bus for an important meeting in the city centre. The meeting took up most of the morning. It was intense and required my full concentration. By noon, when it was all over, I finally had a moment to breathe a sigh of relief. I got on the bus to head back to the park and ride, where my car was waiting. The afternoon bus was less crowded, quiet. I rested my head against the window, watching the buildings slide by, feeling tired but satisfied with a job well done. Out of habit, I pulled out my phone to kill some time. I opened the Facebook app. The notification screen lit up with dozens of new likes and comments on yesterday's post. I scrolled through them distractedly, smiling, and then I saw it. A small red icon over the messenger symbol, signaling a new message. The strange thing was, it wasn't in my main inbox. It was in the message requests folder, the place where messages from people not on my friends list go to die. A flicker of curiosity mixed with caution sparked within me. I rarely received messages from strangers. Usually, it was spam, advertisements, or someone who had mistaken me for someone else. I hesitated for a moment before clicking on it. The screen showed a name I had never seen before. Sarah, last name. Below it was the message preview, just a few words. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. It was probably just another fake account. But the name Sarah had a vague familiarity. Jamie had mentioned a best friend named Sarah. He said they were friends from birth, as close as siblings. But it was a common name. It must be a coincidence, I told myself. Nevertheless, my curiosity won. I took a deep breath and tapped on the conversation to read the full message. The bus was going over a bumpy patch of road, but I no longer felt it. My eyes were glued to my phone screen, reading and rereading the short, but incredibly heavy, line of text. It wasn't a long message. There were no pleasantries. It got straight to the point, as cold and sharp as a razor blade. You should be careful who you're calling your boyfriend when they are someone else's. Each word seemed to freeze in the air. Around me, the sound of the bus engine, the chatter of other passengers, the noise of the city, it all seemed to fade into a terrifying silence. All that remained was that single line of text, blinking on the screen like a judgment. The first feeling wasn't anger or heartbreak. It was profound, dizzying confusion. Someone else's? My brain scrambled to process the information. Was there some kind of mistake? Was this girl just being jealous for no reason? Maybe she was an ex-girlfriend of Jamie's who couldn't accept reality. A series of hypotheses flashed through my mind, all of them desperate attempts to deny what my gut instantly knew to be true. I clicked on Sarah's profile. It was private, but I could see her profile picture. A beautiful woman with dark hair, a kind smile, and intelligent eyes. She didn't look like a crazy person or a troublemaker. She looked normal, trustworthy, and that made me even more terrified. In the short list of mutual friends, I saw a few names from Jamie's football team, names he had mentioned before. My heart began to pound harder. This was not a random coincidence. This woman was genuinely connected to Jamie. I read the message again. Someone else's. That phrase twisted in my mind. It wasn't just a warning. It was a claim of ownership. It implied that I was the intruder, the other woman, when I had always believed I was the protagonist. My entire worldview of this relationship, of the past 9 months, began to shake violently. Every red flag I had tried to ignore, every excuse I had made for him, now came rushing back to attack me with terrifying force. Not going to his home, the secret football games, the Facebook privacy, the strange behavior at the coffee shop, all those disconnected pieces suddenly began to snap together, forming a horrifying picture I didn't want to see. The bus pulled up to my stop. I was barely conscious of myself getting off. I felt like I was moving in a nightmare, my body and mind detached. That message wasn't just a message. It was the key that had unlocked Pandora's box of lies, and all the ugliest demons were about to fly out. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I knew one thing for sure. My life, as I knew it, was about to change forever. As I read and reread that single sentence, you should be careful who you're calling your boyfriend when they are someone else's. Time seemed to stop. The bus continued its familiar route, but for me, everything had come to a halt. I felt my chest tighten, the air growing thick and hard to breathe. It wasn't a sharp, electric shock, but rather a slow-acting poison seeping into every fibre of my being, numbing my senses and my thoughts. My brain, in a last-ditch effort at self-preservation, began to frantically search for alternative, rational explanations. Was this a cruel prank? A jealous old friend of Jamie's trying to sabotage our happiness? Or perhaps a case of mistaken identity? Maybe there was another Jamie, another story entirely unrelated to me. I clung to these flimsy possibilities like a drowning person grabbing at straws, because the only alternative that this message was the truth was too monstrous to confront. I stared at the name Sarah on the screen. The name, as I said, wasn't entirely foreign. Jamie had mentioned her, but the way he had spoken of her was so cleverly calculated to extinguish any spark of suspicion. He didn't just say, "Sarah is my friend." He had built an entire narrative around their friendship. "Sarah and I grew up together," he'd told me. "Our houses were next to each other. Our moms are best friends. We're practically family, like brother and sister. She knows all my worst secrets from when I was in diapers." By emphasizing the brother-sister relationship, he had placed her in a safe, non-sexual zone. He had framed her as a part of his family, someone who could pose no romantic threat. I, a person with many close male friends of my own, had completely accepted that explanation. I respected their long-standing friendship. I never once felt jealous or threatened by Sarah, because in my mind she was simply Jamie's platonic sister. But now this message shattered that illusion. Its tone was not that of a sister worried about her brother. Its tone was that of a betrayed woman. The phrase "someone else's" carried a clear, possessive weight. It didn't say he's dating someone else. It said he is someone else's. It was an assertion of ownership, a declaration that a primary, legitimate relationship existed somewhere, and I was the outsider, the trespasser. My heart began to beat in a chaotic rhythm, fast and hard, like a drum being beaten relentlessly. I felt a wave of nausea rise from my stomach. The initial confusion slowly gave way to the cold feeling of an unveiling truth. The beautiful picture Jamie had painted of a single, caring man looking for love was beginning to crack. Through those cracks, I could glimpse another reality, one I had never been invited into. I thought back to my Facebook post, the handbag, the thank you, and the name Jamie. I had publicly called him my amazing boyfriend. Perhaps that was what had triggered Sarah. Maybe she had been quietly following me, or a mutual friend had sent her a screenshot. The thought of being watched, judged by a woman I didn't even know, made my skin crawl. I felt so naive, so exposed. I had been happily boasting about a relationship that was, it turned out, a dirty secret. Shame began to creep in, hot and burning. Shame for being so trusting. Shame for ignoring my own intuition. Shame for making that post. I wished I could turn back time, delete that post, delete the entire past 9 months. But it was too late. The message had been sent, the warning had been delivered, and it was now hanging over my head like a death sentence. That warning wasn't just information, it was an undressing. It stripped away the veneer of romance and happiness, revealing a raw and ugly truth beneath. It forced me to confront the possibility that the man I had loved, trusted, and given my heart to might not be the person I thought he was. He might be a liar, a cheat, and I might be just one of his victims. The shock came not only from Jamie's betrayal, but from the collapse of my faith in my own judgment. How could I have been so wrong? That question was more painful than the truth about Jamie, and it would haunt me for a long, long time. When the bus finally pulled into the park and ride station, I stepped off in a state of near somnambulism. My legs moved mechanically, but my mind was still trapped in the moment I read that message. The afternoon air was a bit chilly, but I felt nothing. All physical sensations seemed to have been numbed, replaced by a raging internal storm of emotions. Confusion, fear, anger, and a dull, aching pain began to form. I walked through the vast parking lot, searching for my car. Each step felt heavy, as if my shoes were filled with lead. I found my car at the end of a row, a familiar object in a world that had suddenly become alien. I opened the door, slumped into the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut. The sudden silence inside the car was a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I placed my hands on the steering wheel, but I couldn't start the engine. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do anything. I just sat there, staring into the empty space ahead, my phone screen still glowing in my hand, Sarah's words searing my retinas. For a full 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like an eternity. During that time, my mind was a battlefield. One part of me was still trying to deny it. This is a misunderstanding. There must be a logical explanation. This part tried to rewind to the happy memories. Jamie's smile, his sweet words, the feeling of safety in his arms, his generosity on my birthday. How could someone do all those things and not be sincere? But another part, the more rational and pragmatic side, began to connect the dots. The red flags I had once dismissed as trivial now appeared in sharp relief, lining up in a long accusatory row. Never going to his place. Because it wasn't his place. It was their place. The secret football games. Because Sarah was always there, I couldn't be. The weird behavior at Starbucks. He didn't want Claudia to get suspicious, because he was likely angling with her too. No introductions to friends and family. How could he introduce his secret girlfriend to people who knew his official girlfriend? The Facebook privacy policy. It was the only way to keep his two worlds from colliding. With each piece that clicked into place, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The feeling of being deceived began to take over, a cold and bitter sensation. I hadn't just been lied to. I'd been disrespected. He had thought I was foolish enough to believe all those lies. And the worst part was, I had been. My self-esteem shattered into a million pieces. I felt so stupid, so pathetic. Tears began to well up. Not the tears of romantic heartbreak, but hot tears of anger and humiliation. After about 10 minutes of sitting motionless, a new energy, fueled by outrage, suddenly surged through me. The paralysis vanished, replaced by a determination to act. I had to know the truth. I had to confront him. I couldn't go home and pretend like nothing had happened. I started the car, the engine roaring to life in the quiet lot. My first instinct was to drive straight to the service station where he worked. I needed to look him in the eye and ask. I needed to see his reaction. On the way there, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was still hammering in my chest. I imagined the confrontation. What would I say? Would I show him the message? What would he say? Would he deny it? Or would he admit everything? But when I arrived at the service station, another wave of disappointment hit me. I looked through the glass doors, but I couldn't see him. I asked an employee and was told his shift had ended an hour ago. He had gone home. Gone home. The phrase sounded so ironic. He had gone to their home. The initial surge of anger deflated slightly, replaced by a sense of helplessness. What was I supposed to do now? I couldn't drive to my mom's house and break down in front of her. I needed a friend. I needed an ally. And immediately I thought of my best friend. She worked at a pub in the town centre. Without hesitation, I turned the car around and drove straight there. I needed to talk to someone who would believe me, someone who would give me an objective perspective. I parked near the pub, my legs feeling a bit shaky as I got out. I walked in, the noise and music feeling like they belonged to another world. I found my friend behind the bar, polishing glasses. Our eyes met, and she immediately knew something was wrong. "I need a 5-minute break," I said, my voice hoarse. She nodded without a question, took off her apron, and motioned for me to follow her outside. We stood in the small alley behind the pub, the designated smoking area, and there, under the dim yellow light, I told her everything, my voice trembling, showing her Sarah's message. The shock and outrage in her eyes confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was on the brink of a horrifying truth. We stood in the cold, narrow alley behind the pub. The stale smell of beer and cigarette smoke hung in the air. My best friend, Anna, read and reread the message on my phone screen, her expression shifting from surprise to pure fury. Anna is practical and blunt, my anchor in every storm. She had met Jamie a few times, and while she found him a little too perfect, she had supported my relationship. But now, the skepticism in her eyes had hardened into certainty. "That son of a bitch," she hissed, handing the phone back to me. I knew something was off. Nobody is that perfect. Her validation, though painful, brought a strange sense of relief. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. What I was feeling was real. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice cracking. Should I text her back, or should I call Jamie and confront him? Anna thought for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "Don't call Jamie," she said definitively. "If you call him now, he'll have time to invent some story. He'll say this girl is crazy, an obsessed ex. He'll manipulate you. You need to have the facts first. You need to talk to this girl." Her advice was like a beacon in my chaotic fog. It was perfectly logical. Confronting Jamie without full information would just be a futile argument, where he could easily turn the tables and paint me as the paranoid, jealous one. I needed to know who Sarah was and what her story was. But what do I say to her? I asked, worried. I don't even know where to start. Keep it simple, Anna said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Just ask her straight up. Text back and ask, okay, well, whose boyfriend is he then? Put the ball back in her court. See how she responds. I took a deep breath. Typing those words was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My fingers trembled over the virtual keyboard. Each character felt like an admission that my relationship was a lie. Okay, well, whose boyfriend is he then? No question mark. Just a blunt, almost challenging query. I hit send and immediately felt a wave of regret. What if she didn't reply? What if this really was just a prank, and I was making a mess of things? Anna saw the panic on my face. Calm down, she said. We'll wait. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The next 10 minutes were probably the longest, most stressful 10 minutes of my life. Anna and I stood in silence in the alley, both staring at my phone screen, waiting for the 3 little dots that signal the other person is typing. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my chest. With every passing second, the fragile hope that this was all a misunderstanding died a little more. And then it appeared. The typing icon. My heart stopped. I held my breath. A moment later, a new message popped up. It contained only one word, a single word that completely demolished my world. Mine. If the first message was a punch to the gut, the word mine was a gunshot straight to the heart. There was no more ambiguity, no more room for doubt or alternative explanations. It was a definitive, irrefutable declaration. Sarah wasn't an obsessed ex-girlfriend. She was the current girlfriend. She was the woman Jamie went home to every night. She was the reason I had never been to his home, never met his friends, never been made public. A strange emptiness washed over me. The shock was so immense it bypassed pain, leaving a numb void. I showed the phone to Anna. She read it and let out a curse. I remembered all the times Jamie had talked about Sarah. She's like my sister. We could never date, it would be too weird. My mum would kill me if I ever hurt her. It was all a perfectly engineered lie. He had used their sacred friendship as a cover for his betrayal. He had exploited the trust of both of us. Oh my God, I whispered, finally finding my voice. He told me she was his best friend, like a sister. The brutal truth hit me. I wasn't the girlfriend. I was the other woman. I was the affair, his dirty little secret. For the past 9 months, I had been living in a play without knowing the script. I had fallen in love with a fictional character, a version of Jamie created just for me. Meanwhile, the real Jamie was living another life, a real life, with a real woman named Sarah. The emptiness was quickly replaced by a surging tide of rage. Not at Sarah. I wasn't angry with her. She was a victim too, perhaps an even bigger one than me. I was angry at Jamie. A pure, white-hot fury. How could someone be so cruel? How could he look me in the eye, tell me he loved me, while living a double life? How could he sleep at night? I knew I had to continue the conversation with Sarah. We had a common enemy. We had answers the other needed. The initial shock had passed. Now it was time to find the truth, the whole truth, no matter how painful it was. After the gut-wrenching impact of the word mine, a strange transformation occurred within me. The feeling of a helpless victim began to recede, replaced by the cold, determined focus of a detective. Sarah and I, 2 strangers connected by the deceit of the same man, embarked on a conversation that would last for nearly 5 hours. That conversation was not an argument or a session of mutual blaming. Instead, it was like a war council, a meticulous cross-examination of evidence, where we pieced together the fragments of truth to expose the true scale of the drama Jamie had directed. We started cautiously. I texted back, "He told me you were his best friend, like a sister." Sarah replied instantly, "He told me you were just a new friend he met through work." A friend. With just those 2 sentences, his web of lies began to unravel. He had created 2 parallel narratives, each designed to keep us in safe, non-threatening positions in the other's mind. To me, Sarah was the untouchable sister. To Sarah, I was just a harmless platonic friend. Our conversation quickly evolved into a detailed exchange of information. We were like two investigators comparing notes on the same suspect. Last Friday night, he said he had to work overtime. Was he with you? I typed. The typing icon appeared. A few seconds later, Sarah's reply came through. Yes, we went to the movies. He told me he got off work early. My chest tightened. Last Friday night, I had been at home alone, feeling a little sad that Jamie had to work, but also proud of him for being so diligent. Meanwhile, he was sitting in a movie theatre with Sarah, their hands probably intertwined in the dark. It was Sarah's turn. What about the weekend at the B&B last month? He told me he was going camping alone to clear his head. We were there, I admitted, feeling a bitter shame. He said he needed some private time with me, and so it continued. Day by day, week by week, event by event. We cross-referenced our calendars, compared text messages, and checked old posts. The picture that emerged was increasingly clear and horrifying. Jamie was a master of logistics and manipulation. He had been running 2 full-time relationships almost flawlessly. His lies weren't just simple falsehoods. They were an intricate system, built around our respective work schedules and social lives. When I said I was busy with a wedding on a weekend, he would spend that time with Sarah. When Sarah had a business trip, he would be with me. The family dinner he told me about was actually dinner with Sarah's family. The away game he used to forbid me from attending was, in reality, a romantic weekend trip with her. We even delved into the smallest, most painful details. The birthday present I bought for his mum? Sarah confirmed his mother had received it. She thought it was a gift from both of us, Sarah said, making me physically ill. Jamie hadn't just lied to us. He had involved his own mother in his charade, making me an invisible co-gifter in his own family. The peak of disgust came when we discussed Christmas. It's a sacred time, meant for family and loved ones. Jamie had managed to split it between us. He spent Christmas Eve with Sarah and her family, telling me he had to stay with his mum because she wasn't well. Then, on Boxing Day, he came to my house, bringing gifts and telling Sarah he had to visit a sick relative. He had turned the most sacred holidays into a stage for his selfishness. As we cross-checked our schedules over the past 9 months, we were able to account for almost every single day, every hour. There were only 2 days over the Christmas holiday where we couldn't pinpoint his whereabouts. A mysterious gap in an otherwise packed schedule of deceit. Throughout that hours-long conversation, my anger at Jamie grew, but a strange new feeling also emerged, a sense of empathy and kinship with Sarah. We were strangers, yet we shared a common pain, a common betrayal. We had believed in the same man, loved the same illusion. We spoke to each other with an openness and honesty that Jamie, with all his lies, could never achieve. He had tried to divide and conquer us, but in the end his own deception had brought us together. That text message cross-examination was an excruciating but necessary experience. It was like surgery without anesthesia. It cut out the tumor of lies, leaving behind an open but clean wound. I was no longer living in ambiguity. I knew the truth. And the truth, however brutal, is a form of power. I was no longer a blind victim. I was a survivor who now knew the face of her enemy. And I knew I was not alone in this fight. As the conversation between Sarah and me reached a temporary lull, after we had uncovered nearly the entire web of Jamie's lies over the past 9 months, Sarah suddenly proposed a new theory, a theory that made the story even more complex and pathological. You know, she typed, "For a long time I suspected he was cheating, but I never thought it was with you." "Who did you think it was?" I asked, intrigued. A name popped up on the screen, a name that was chillingly familiar. Claudia, the girl from the Starbucks, the girl with the bright blonde hair, whose presence always made Jamie act so strangely, the girl I had dismissed as just a friendly but slightly distant colleague. Now, she was suddenly thrust into the center of the drama. "Why did you think it was her?" I asked urgently, feeling a new surge of adrenaline. "A woman's intuition, I guess," Sarah replied. The way he talked about her, there was something different. He always praised how smart and quick she was. And a few times I visited the service station, I saw the way they looked at each other. There was a rapport he didn't have with his other co-workers. I confronted him about it once, but he just laughed and said I was crazy, that Claudia was just a kid, and he saw her as a little sister. The little sister routine again. It was apparently Jamie's default script for concealing his illicit relationships. He had used it on me to talk about Sarah, and used it on Sarah to talk about Claudia. A wave of revulsion washed over me. This man wasn't just a liar, he was a repetitive, pathologically uncreative fraud in his own deceptions. And then, Sarah revealed an even more ironic detail. The funniest part is, she wrote, "It was Jamie who suggested I collaborate with you for work." I was stunned. I remembered that moment. A few months prior, I was looking for a new photographer to add to my list of trusted vendors for my wedding clients. Jamie had said, "Oh, my best friend Sarah is a fantastic photographer. Her work is amazing. Let me show you her portfolio." He had shown me her website, and I was genuinely impressed. I had added Sarah's name and contact information to my list. We had even exchanged a few professional, polite emails. Looking back now, that move by Jamie wasn't just reckless. It was arrogant to an extreme degree. He was so confident in his ability to control and manipulate that he was willing to let his two worlds lightly collide in a professional context. He played the role of the helpful connector, all while playing with fire. Perhaps he got a thrill from the danger. Or perhaps he thought that by defining our relationship within a work framework, he could further solidify his lie. "See, they're just business associates," he might have told himself. It was an incredibly risky move, one that showed the hubris of a conman who believes he will never be caught. "We have to talk to Claudia," I typed decisively. "If he's lying to her too, we need to know. Maybe she's the missing piece, the one who can explain those 2 mysterious Christmas days." The idea of a league of betrayed girlfriends began to form in my mind. If there were 3 of us, our power would be greater. We could confront Jamie together, leaving him with no escape route. Sarah agreed immediately. She had Claudia's phone number from Jamie's workplace. A strange sense of excitement took hold of us. We were no longer just heartbroken victims. We had become hunters, determined to expose the entire truth. We decided to draft a message together to send to Claudia. We needed to be careful, not to scare her off, but to be direct enough for her to understand the gravity of the situation. In that moment, I suddenly remembered a chance encounter I'd had with both Jamie and Claudia together. Not at the service station, but at a shopping centre near what I thought was his house. I was out buying that birthday gift for his mom. I saw them from a distance, looking at things in a store together. They looked very natural, like a couple. When Jamie saw me, he seemed slightly startled, but quickly masked it. He introduced us hastily. "Oh, this is Claudia, my co-worker. And this is my name, my friend." He emphasized the word friend in a strange way. Claudia just smiled politely. The encounter lasted only a few seconds, but it had left me with a vague sense of unease. Now, that feeling returned, stronger and clearer than ever. The discovery of Claudia didn't just add to the body count of victims, it changed the very nature of Jamie's transgression. He wasn't just a two-timer. He was a serial predator, a man with a repeating pattern of behavior. He targeted women in different circles of his life: his childhood best friend, Sarah, a client from a dating app, me, and a co-worker, Claudia, and wove separate webs of lies for each of them. This story was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about a dangerous psychological manipulator, and we were about to confront another one of his victims, not knowing that she might be too deep in his lies to be saved. After deciding we had to contact Claudia, Sarah and I took some time to carefully craft a message. We knew the approach was critical. If we came on too strong, she would likely become defensive and side with Jamie. We needed to present ourselves as allies, as people seeking the truth, not as attackers. Finally, Sarah, as the one with Claudia's number, sent a gentle but direct text. "Hi Claudia, it's Sarah. Me and another friend named My Name have been talking, and some things aren't adding up about Jamie. We think he might be being dishonest with all 3 of us. Would you be willing to talk for a minute?" We braced ourselves for a variety of reactions. Maybe she would be shocked. Maybe she would be angry. Maybe she would immediately join our alliance. But we were completely unprepared for the response we actually received. Claudia's reply came relatively quickly, and it was as cold as ice. "I don't know what you two are talking about. Jamie and I are dating. He already told me about you two. He said you're both obsessed with him and are trying to ruin our relationship. Sarah and I read the message in stunned silence. He already told me about you two. That sentence revealed that Jamie wasn't just a liar, he was a ruthless strategist. He had anticipated that we might one day contact each other, and he had made a preemptive strike. He had inoculated Claudia, poisoning her mind with a defensive narrative that painted us as the villains, the pathetic stalkers. He had turned the truth into a personal attack and the victims into the perpetrators. We tried to explain. We sent her screenshots of our conversation, evidence of Jamie being with me when he said he was elsewhere, or with Sarah when he claimed to be working. We presented an irrefutable case file of his deception, complete with dates, locations, and specific lies. We thought that, when faced with such clear evidence, any rational person would have to see the truth. But we had underestimated the power of manipulation and denial. Claudia's response to our evidence wasn't skepticism or curiosity, it was hostility. "You two are pathetic," she texted back, her words dripping with contempt. "What do these screenshots prove?" "You could have faked them. I know Jamie loves me. He would never do that. You're just jealous because he chose me and not you." The conversation quickly escalated into a one-sided attack from Claudia. She didn't just disbelieve us, she mocked us. "You're living in fake relationships with him in your heads. Jamie is too nice. He didn't want to hurt your feelings by telling you directly he wasn't interested. You should both get some help. Leave us alone." Her words were like knives, twisting in our wounds. To be called delusional, pathetic, and obsessed by someone we were trying to help was the ultimate humiliation. We had hoped to find a third ally, someone who would corroborate the truth. Instead, we had run into a fortified wall of denial, a wall built with Jamie's lies and reinforced by Claudia's own insecurities. Looking back now, I can understand, though not condone, her reaction. Claudia was likely the most vulnerable of the three of us. She was younger, and her relationship with Jamie was probably built entirely within their work environment, where he could control the narrative absolutely. For her, admitting we were telling the truth would have meant confronting a reality too painful to bear, that the man she loved was not only cheating on her, but saw her as just one of several options, that her perfect love story was a sham. It's often far easier to deny the truth and attack the messengers than to face the collapse of your own worldview. Jamie had successfully manipulated her to the point where she was willing to believe an absurd lie, that two strange women had suddenly teamed up to invent a complex story, over a simple truth, that her boyfriend was a cheat. She had been gaslit with devastating effectiveness. She was not just Jamie's victim, she had become a soldier defending his lies. Our conversation with Claudia ended in failure and bitterness. We realized we couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. Our quest to find the missing piece for the Christmas holidays had failed. Our alliance of three had crumbled before it could even form. It was just me and Sarah again, the only two people in this story willing to face the truth. Claudia's denial, however, only strengthened our resolve. It showed us the extent of Jamie's danger and manipulative prowess. He wasn't just a philanderer, he was a soul destroyer, and we knew we had to end this, for our own sakes. The failure to win Claudia over to our side left a bitter taste, but it was also the final catalyst that propelled Sarah and me into action. There was nothing left to investigate, nothing left to hope for. There was only one thing left to do: end it. Put a stop to this drama once and for all. We didn't coordinate a joint confrontation plan. Each person's pain was unique, and so was the way we chose to end it. Sarah, with her 18-month relationship and a much longer history, had a more difficult path ahead. As for me, with 9 months of living in an illusion, I had only one desire: to get out as quickly as possible and never look back. I didn't need a dialogue. I didn't need an explanation or an apology from him. Anything he said now would just be another lie. I just needed to cut the cord, completely and utterly. I sat on my bed, the same bed where I had joyfully arranged my birthday gifts for a photo just weeks before, feeling a chilling sense of irony. My hands, no longer trembling but filled with a cold determination, opened my chat with Jamie on my phone. His last message to me had been that morning, a hollow "good morning, babe," that now made me sick to my stomach. I didn't waste time with words. Actions speak louder. I took a screenshot of the beginning of my conversation with Sarah. The image captured her first message. "You should be careful." My question. "Whose boyfriend is he then?" And her one-word reply. "Mine." I sent that screenshot to Jamie without a single accompanying word. I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to know that I knew. I wanted him to experience a few moments of sheer panic as he realized the two worlds he had fought so hard to keep separate had finally collided. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. The natural reaction of a liar caught in the act is to try to regain control of the narrative with their voice. But I wasn't going to give him that chance. I declined the call. Instantly, a barrage of texts began to arrive. "Babe, what's going on? What is that? What nonsense is Sarah telling you? She's just being jealous. Pick up the phone, let me explain." His weak, predictable excuses only deepened my contempt. I didn't reply. Instead, I typed one final message, an indictment and a farewell, all in one. "I've spoken to Sarah. I know everything. About your 18 months. About the lies. About all of it. We are done. You can go fuck yourself, and however many other girlfriends you have. Lose my number." The words were harsh, crude, not like my usual self. But in that moment, I didn't care. I needed to unleash all the anger and pain I had been suppressing. I needed to ensure there was no ambiguity. This was a full stop, not a comma. Immediately after hitting send, I performed a final series of liberating actions. I blocked his phone number. I blocked his Facebook account. I deleted our entire chat history, wiping 9 months of lies from my phone. I went into my contacts and deleted his name. Each delete and block felt like a cleansing ritual, a way of reclaiming control over my own life. "Of course," he tried. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. I had a suspicion and answered it. It was him. His voice was trying to sound calm, almost nonchalant. "Hey, just wanted to see how you are. You're overreacting." He was attempting one last gaslighting tactic, trying to convince me that my reaction was unreasonable. "I have nothing to say to you," I said coldly. "I have proof of all your lies. Don't ever call me again." And I hung up, then blocked that number too. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. My breakup was swift, decisive, and conducted entirely in the digital realm. It lacked dramatic tears or slamming doors. It was a cold, precise surgical procedure. I had excised the tumor named Jamie from my life. The feeling afterward wasn't heartbreak. It was relief. An overwhelming sense of relief. The burden of doubt, of uncertainty, of living in a half relationship was lifted. For the first time in 9 months, I felt like I could breathe again. The wound was still there, and it would take a long time to heal, but at least I was free. After the storm, there is always a silence. The silence in my life after completely cutting off Jamie was both a liberation and a void that needed to be filled. My world, which had revolved around his texts, his fleeting visits, and his lies, was suddenly quiet. In that quiet, I began the process of healing and reflection, a long and difficult journey. I stayed in touch with Sarah for a while. We were the only two people in the world who could understand exactly what the other had been through. She told me she had broken up with Jamie as well. Her breakup was much more complicated. They had a face-to-face confrontation, full of tears and accusations. Jamie, when cornered with irrefutable evidence, finally admitted to a fraction of the truth, but still tried to minimize his guilt. Sarah was strong and ended the relationship. However, she confessed something to me that worried me. She said she didn't want to end their friendship. "Our moms are best friends," she said. "Our families have been connected since before we were born. I can't just throw all of that away." I understood her predicament, but deep down, I feared that leaving that door open would be an invitation for Jamie to crawl back in. With a manipulator like him, the line between friendship and romance is easily blurred. I truly feared that one day she might go back to him, convinced by his hollow promises of change. As for Claudia, I'm not sure how long her story lasted. I suspect she stayed by Jamie's side, at least for a while, basking in her perceived victory. Perhaps, with me and Sarah no longer serving as the common enemy, the cracks in Jamie's lies began to show. Or perhaps he simply found a new target and discarded her. Once, many months later, I saw her in town by chance. She was with another man, and she looked happy. I felt a small sense of relief for her. And Jamie? From what I heard through the grapevine of distant mutual acquaintances, he remained single, or at least never settled down. He was likely still continuing his cycle of deception, just with new victims. People like him rarely change. For me, the healing process was a real battle. I struggled with feelings of shame and self-blame. I replayed every moment, wondering how I could have been so blind. My trust in others, and more importantly in myself, was severely damaged. I went through a period of intense suspicion, seeing red flags everywhere, even in healthy interactions. But time, along with the support of amazing friends like Anna and a great deal of self-reflection, is truly a healer. Gradually, I learned to forgive myself. I realized that being deceived isn't a sign of stupidity. It's a sign that you dared to be open and to trust. The fault was not mine. The fault lay with the one who abused that trust. And then, when I least expected it, true love arrived. I met my now husband, my life partner. He is everything Jamie was not. He is genuine, open, and consistent. There are no secrets, no forbidden zones. He introduced me to all his friends and family from the very beginning. Our Facebook pages are filled with silly photos of us together. He never makes me guess or feel insecure. With him, I learned what real love is. It's not about grand gestures or flowery words, but about feeling safe, respected, and completely yourself. Looking back at the story with Jamie, I no longer feel anger or pain. Instead, I feel a strange sense of gratitude. That horrific experience taught me an invaluable lesson. It equipped me with a highly sensitive red flag detector. It taught me to trust my gut, even when my rational mind tries to make excuses. It taught me that my self-worth is not dependent on whether a man chooses me. And most importantly, it led me to where I am today, happy, at peace, and with someone who truly deserves my love. Jamie's story was a dark chapter, but it was a necessary one in the book of my life. It was the darkness that makes the current light shine so much brighter. And for that, finally, I can say, I am grateful.